Well, hi everyone, I'm Sam Lassant, and we're here on location at Luzerne County Community College, and this is the Luzerne County Community College Report. Great things happening here. Man, I'm having a great time on this campus. I can't believe how much it's grown throughout the years. It's just wonderful. Now, a lot of things happening here at the college, and there's an interesting thing happening with the history department. And I thought it'd be interesting for you to know what's happening. This conference that's coming up, which is the Pennsylvania History 33rd Annual Conference, it's about abolitionism. And it's something that I think we should really look into. But before we do that, let me welcome Martha Pezzino, chairman of the conference. And also you're in the history department, right?
Yes.
What a beautiful campus.
Yes, it really is. It is a gorgeous campus. I don't think enough people realize how beautiful it is and how big it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's spread out real nice. Okay.
It is.
And how many years you've been teaching here, you said?
More than 20. I started full-time in 05, but I was adjuncting for a few years before that, so 23 years.
It's interesting, you started when you were 17 years old.
Something like that,
Yeah,
absolutely.
You were a child genius.
Thank you, yes, absolutely.
And sitting next to you, and we're going to get to you, is Richelle, right?
Yep.
And Richelle's, it's interesting how small this country, the world is. Richelle's grandparents are extremely good friends of mine, Pezzentis. And
they're fabulous people.
And they have the oil company and the plumbing company, and I've been using them for years. They're just great people. But anyway, tell us about your history department.
Well, our history department, we're part of the social and behavioral sciences department. We offer a 2-year degree in history. We have, I'm going to say, the best historians in the area that specialize in a variety of things from cultural and social history, military history, women's and African American history, and you can just get a very well-rounded understanding of history by taking the classes here.
You know, it's interesting because some people say, well, what do we need to know about history for, okay? And, you know, let's move forward, okay? And so we know the answer why history is so important, correct, Richelle? Tell us why history is so important in our lives. And I know you go on forever and ever.
I mean, I really could, and
Yeah.
I might.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I had a professor once who said you wouldn't buy a used car without wanting to know what its history is. And so just kind of expand that to everything. Like, you need to know somebody's, your car's history, a person's history that you're friends with or your significant other. But history is really important because it helps to identify us as a culture. It helps to identify us as a nation, as a people. How do you understand where you are unless you don't understand history? It's the reason I was drawn to history, is because I wanted to know where we came from, where we are. Studying history is personal.
Exactly.
It really is.
Exactly.
You know, people say, like, you know, if you could have dinner with anybody in history, who would it be?
Yeah.
My grandparents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
it wouldn't be, you know, like Gandhi or,
Boy, that's so
you know,
true.
I mean,
That
it would
is-
be
yep.
because the study of history is very personal.
Boy, that is so true. Mm-hmm. You know, you talk about your grandfather, okay, you could tell you stories I used to enjoy when I was going to King's College. In the morning before I would go to college, I would stop and see my grandfather, Neil Lasanti. And it was just an experience, and I was done, I'd stop and see him after college. And what an education I got from him, and he never went to college, never went to school. Isn't that amazing? I'm sure your grandparents and ancestors
Well,
were
see, I didn't really know my grandparents. They passed away when I was either very young or before I was born. So
that makes you proud of your heritage.
yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
speaking of heritage, Luzerne County is going to be hosting or involved with we're going to highlight the 33rd Annual Pennsylvania History Conference. Tell me what that conference is about.
Well, the theme of this year is abolitionism in Pennsylvania history. So we always choose a topic within Pennsylvania history because history is personal and Pennsylvania is personal to all of us because we live in Pennsylvania. And so we always choose a theme that is Pennsylvania. This year we chose abolitionism, and we usually kind of get the historians together and kind of talk about, what we want to talk about next or what we think is relevant at the time, or what hasn't been talked about in a while. And so we have a few speakers to come in to discuss different aspects of abolitionism in Pennsylvania.
How'd you pick abolitionism?
I think I suggested it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
I focus a lot on women's history, but I got to women's history through studying abolitionism. And I think it's something that a lot of students don't know a lot about, and our students do come to the conference and the public. I don't know how much the public knows about it. And Pennsylvania was so key to abolitionism that I think it's really relevant to our area, not just local to NEPA, but the broader area as well.
For those who have heard the word abolitionism, tell me what it is.
It's an immediate end to the institution of slavery.
What should we learn from that?
Well, I think that it's important to recognize that this is something that happened in our nation's history, and I think it's important to recognize or to see the patterns that existed so that we don't fall into those same patterns in the future. And it's something that we can kind of trace not just in our own history, but in history throughout the world, all the way back to the ancient era. And so while it may be different to our time and place, I think it's important to recognize that it happened, take steps to ensure that it doesn't happen again, and also recognize that slavery does still exist in many forms and shapes today, not in the same respect that it did. And so we can maybe use some of the same practices that we used in the past to eradicate the institution of slavery in the United States to kind of tackle some of those other forms of slavery.
What will we learn from this conference, Martha?
We will learn about the different ways that Pennsylvania was relevant to the abolitionist movement. We will learn about the institution of slavery, which is a very, very difficult thing to talk about.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't aware of exactly how harsh it is. I don't know how people do it, teach history to younger people because slavery was so harsh. How do you talk about it to younger people without giving them nightmares, right? So on the college level, it's our responsibility to bring the reality of it. And so we'll talk about the institution of slavery, and then we'll talk about the ways in which people tried to end slavery. So why did they try to end slavery? How did they try to end slavery? Why was Pennsylvania so relevant?
Yeah, why was it?
Pennsylvania, our geography has so much to do with it. We are just north of the Mason-Dixon line, and so the Underground Railroad, first of all, started here. It was started by the Quakers, and the Quakers were very active in Pennsylvania, and that's something that Richelle is going to talk about in her presentation. But our geography, so many escaping enslaved people came through Pennsylvania, and that makes us very active in the Underground Railroad, abolitionist societies, that sort of thing.
Let's talk about the Underground Railroad. For those people who don't know what it is, tell us what the either one of you, tell us what the Underground Railroad was.
The Underground Railroad was a system to help escaping enslaved people. So people they were referred to as conductors.
Yes.
And the terminology all had to do with railroads, largely because railroad industry was starting to grow at the time. And so the people who were helping the escaped slaves were conductors. The Underground Railroad referred to the way in which escaped slaves moved from house to house.
Station to station.
Station to station, thank you. Moved from station to station in order to try to gain safety. They would move at night, station to station, until they, most of them headed north, some of them headed west, but for our purposes, we'll talk about the ones that headed north. Into usually, sometimes just the northern states, very often into Canada.
And Richelle, where did they go then?
Often from here, they would go. New York was a big haven. The northern states, they eradicated slavery much earlier than we would see with our southern states. And so once you crossed into Pennsylvania, being freed was a little bit easier until certain laws were instituted to ensure that those who escaped would be returned. And so it's kind of this back and forth battle. But if you could get far enough north, New York was a safe haven. Canada, as you mentioned, was a safe haven.
Were there placements for them?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. There wasn't necessarily a plethora of resources available for them, but they were welcomed in some cases into society where they could start. And many of them would become integral to helping the United States during things like the Civil War. We can look at Frederick Douglass and what he did, and Harriet Tubman and what she did during the Civil War. And so they kind of found their way.
Who are the key abolitionists from Pennsylvania?
From Pennsylvania, it's actually kind of hard to mention key abolitionists. No, well, the big thing is that Pennsylvania had one of the first anti-slavery institutions. It was created in 1775, took a break for the Revolution, came back in 1784, and by 87 it was a Pennsylvania Abolitionist Society, and it wasn't the first national one, but a lot of people were drawn to Pennsylvania. So they weren't necessarily born here, but they were drawn to Pennsylvania because of things like Quakerism and the anti-slavery stance. And so when we look at prominent abolitionists in Pennsylvania, people like William Still, who was not born in Pennsylvania but came here in his 20s and is considered the father of the Underground Railroad because of the amount of people he helped escape. Lucretia Mott, prominent Quaker, born in Massachusetts but moved to Pennsylvania. The two people I'm going to talk about, Sarah and Angelina Grimke, were born in South Carolina and grew up on a plantation. But they moved here and they were prominent abolitionists because they came to Pennsylvania and they joined the movement. I name dropped a few people, but many of them weren't actually born in Pennsylvania. They moved here because of the strong anti-slavery sentiment.
I'm talking to Martha Pezzino, who is chair of this conference that's coming up, and Richelle Smith, about abolitionism. And you know, it's interesting, Martha said something, you know, if you're buying a used car, the first thing you want to know is about what's the history of that car. But there's a lot involved with slavery and what happened and the horrors they went through. What are we going to learn from that? The conference is going to be extremely important. When we come back, I want to learn about I want you to know about two things. Why the conference is so important, it's open to everybody, and what really did we learn from that? Are we continuing to learn something from that? We'll be back right after this. Well, welcome back to the Luzerne County Community College Report. I'm here on campus. It's a beautiful campus. Joining me today is Martha Pezzino and Richelle Smith. Now, who are they? Well, there's a great conference coming up on the 33rd Annual Conference, Abolitionism in Pennsylvania, October the 13th at Luzerne County Community College. We definitely, it's a great event, and Martha and Richelle are going to tell you about that in a second. You know, we learn things from our history, my friends, and Martha is going to be is the chairman of the conference, and Richelle is going to be a presenter. Okay, we were talking about Underground Railroad and the challenges that these people had.
Something to keep in mind is that anybody who was active in the abolitionist movement They were, first of all, doing something that was illegal if they were helping to free people from slavery. And they were absolutely hated in their day. So people like Harriet Tubman, she had a huge bounty on her head. These people, so if you were a conductor in the Underground Railroad, you would often deny that you were doing it. It's not something you were proud of. You would be lying usually to your family and friends about it because it's not something you could talk about because you could easily be arrested for doing something like that. So it's hard to kind of look at a lot of individual names, even though you did a great job at finding individual names. It's hard because people hid what they did. People lied about what they did because it was extremely illegal.
Yeah. You're going to present, right? What are you presenting?
I'm presenting Angelina and Sarah Grimke, their story. So while many did hide, there were, as of 1833, we had the American Anti-Slavery Society. And these two women came from South Carolina. They were drawn to Pennsylvania. Sarah came in the 1820s and Angelina followed in the 1830s. They were drawn to Quakerism. They were very strong in embracing the anti-slavery rhetoric because they grew up on a plantation and they saw it firsthand and how cruel it was. And so they began to embrace that, so much so that they would write letters. Angelina was barred from returning to Charleston because she encouraged Southern women to release their enslaved population. And they made such a mark on the movement. They were actually the first two female speakers for the American Anti-Slavery Society. And so their work really started when they got to Pennsylvania, and they were integral in helping to create places like Pennsylvania Hall, which was a building that was created for sharing and welcoming everyone. It was primarily for abolitionists, but also for women's rights speakers. It existed for 4 days before it was burned down. And Angelina was there the day before it was burned down, giving a speech encouraging the end of slavery. So they were pretty vocal. They had a lot of things thrown at them at their lectures. They were attacked verbally, hated in many places because of what they were doing and how publicly they were doing it. But they held fast throughout the 1830s until they retired into teaching. So they became teachers, but they were integral to the anti-slavery or abolitionist movement.
Boy, when you think today, you know, what they did, and you just shake your head and say, how could people be that way? You know, it frightens you when you think about that, you know. Okay, so we're buying the used car, and we're getting a good history of the used car right now, okay? Tell me, you know, the conference is open to the public. Why October 13th here at Luzerne County Community College? And I'm sure there'll be directions or where to go and a little bit. Where will it be held in?
It'll be held in the ECC, the Educational Conference Center, which is the lower part of the
campus.
Right. We always do it on Indigenous Peoples Day. That's the day that we chose for a lot of reasons, because of the historical significance of the day, for the practical reason that it seems like a lot of schools are closed that day, and so you know, students can come, and we have had quite a few high school students show up, and so we're kind of hoping that that trend continues. So it's always on, like I said, Indigenous Peoples Day. So it's October 13th in the large auditorium of the ECC. It's from 9 a.m. in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We will have 4 speakers, 4 people presenting information. It is free, open to the public. You do not have to register for anything. Just show up.
You know, it's interesting. We talk about cultures, and we talk about, you know, the first thing is when I asked you your name and you told me, and asked your name and said, oh, you're Italian, okay. And then we talk about, you know, our ancestors, and we talk about where we came from. We talk about what we did. I grew up in a little town called Pardisville. And it's a great town, and I love the town because in that town there was the Polish, Slavish, Italian, a couple Irishmen, but we all played together. And each one of us had our own thing. We would having spaghetti and meatballs at my mom's house and grandma. Then the next day I'm having a lupkis at my friends and pierogies. And you learn about the cultures, okay? And this is the interesting, I think, about when we're looking about going back. And what can we learn from that? It's not a white thing, a black thing, a pink thing, an orange thing, a red. It's something that we can appreciate. And hopefully our life's a little bit better. Wouldn't you think so, Martha?
Absolutely, absolutely. And history is about learning about different cultures. You know, it's about looking outside yourself. And, you know, I said it's personal, and it is personal, but it is also about understanding other cultures.
You know, Richelle, you're going to have an interesting job presenting, you know, and as the more you learn, the more it becomes interesting. It reminds me when I go to a museum, and my wife would go in Spain or whatever, we had the pleasure, and we'd see this beautiful mural. I've told this on television, say, oh, Sam, I heard this story, but it's worth repeating. When you see this beautiful mural picture, and you're looking at it, and it looks beautiful, but then someone says, you see that arm, that guy has the arm there, and says, what that arm represents is this. And then he starts describing everything on that mural, and that becomes alive. See, and so history becomes alive. Wouldn't you think so?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm sure that when you're presenting, you know, it's exciting because, you know, history until all of a sudden, wait, let me start telling you about this and what it's going to mean. You know, of course, with the president here, John Udijak, you got to hold him down. He's doing great work. In closing, what would you like to say?
I want to extend an invitation to the entire community to show up. We think of it as not only an opportunity to showcase the school, the campus, the history department, our faculty. I don't know, it's a great opportunity to come and see what we're about.
Come and see Richelle do our presentation.
Yeah.
Your grandparent and grandma would be very proud of you.
Yeah, and my cousin is actually also one of our presenters.
Who is your cousin?
Beth Ann Mazeka.
Well, it's October the 13th, my friends, at Luzerne County Community College. What time?
9 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And it includes lunch in the middle.
Okay.
So we'll take a break for lunch.
So 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., okay, here at Luzerne County Community College, October the 13th. I'm sure if you come, you're going to really have a great time and learn some things. And I mean, just talking to you guys, you know, I love the history, but I'm loving it even more now, okay?
That's great.
Good.
So I wish you the best, okay?
Yeah.
We do it every month, my friends. We give you an update of what's happening at Luzerne County Community College. If you have the opportunity, this campus is absolutely beautiful. We'll see you next time.